As above, so below.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I study coincidences. I'm getting to be known as Dr. Coincidence, and my next book is tentatively titled The Adventures of Dr. Coincidence. Please subscribe to this channel. It helps us get our word out. And the subscription button, as you know, is down there. And consider coming to the Coincidence Cafe, where every third Saturday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we gather together to tell each other coincidence stories. It's a lot of fun, and a lot of coincidences seem to happen among and between people there. And my book, Meaningful Coincidences, encompasses synchronicity and serendipity, and I hope you pay some attention to it as well. My coincidence story today is called 3 Empathic Failures, and involved 2 patients of mine and and my own therapist as a third one. The 2 patients of mine one was Susie, the other Megan, and Susie was much more vulnerable in this session that I'm talking about than I'd ever seen her be in the 5 years of therapy I've known her. I missed how vulnerable she was. And any comment I made became a criticism. I was bullying her, and she got mad and hurt. So I just stopped. One of those times when being a therapist, you just got to like feel like you can't do anything. And I couldn't do anything. So I said, Susie, I can't do anything. And we ended early. I offered her my apologies by email, and she said, it's already done. I already forgive you for it. And we talked about it a little bit, but what it came out to be that I need to be aware that she has this in her, and we'll get to that sometime, but we didn't on our next session. We got back to our usual way of interacting with each other, and she's a lot of fun, and we have a good time together, and she learns a lot, and I do too. The second patient, Megan, I've known her for a couple of years, and Megan uses emotions to cover her, uses words to cover her emotions. She talks a lot when she's got feelings she doesn't want to show. She's a poet. She's good at it, covering her emotions with words. I confronted her gently about it. I thought it was gently. She walked away wanting to quit therapy. And that's after several years of much success. But she copies, makes a copy of our sessions, and she looks at them a lot of times. And so she looked at the session, and the recording did not show that I was a nasty guy. She realized it was more her perceptions of me, so we were able to work it out. The next one is, I told my therapist about an amazing coincidence I had with somebody at dance, and I was just loved telling the story to her, and one of the first time I was telling it, my therapist remarked, "You do that all the time." She missed the feeling of joy and connection. I was hurt and angry. It reminded me of how I felt with my ex-wife, who could not acknowledge my abnormal experiences, and also my mother, who could not see me as anything but her ego gratifier. So what did I get out of this? And you got to look for lessons, and there probably are several, but what I got out of this is I do what my therapist did with other people sometimes. I just normalize their coincidence, and it's hurtful because it's unique for them. Mm-hmm. And so I realized what it was like to be on the other side of that. And now I'm much more careful with when that possibility happens. I'm going to be more aware of what it feels like on the other side. Well, we have a wonderful guest today. Dana Klisanin is an innovative psychologist, and you'll see how innovative Dana is, named as one of Forbes' 50 leading Female Futurists. Bet you never heard that title before, but it's out there, and it's wonderful that she is in among that group. She's deeply immersed in research exploring resilience and adaptability of the human psyche in the face of what we've got now, ladies and gentlemen, existential challenges. We like challenges to our existence. I mean, that's what that means. The exploration is coupled with a profound commitment to fostering human-nature coincidence or connections. I'll call them coincidence, but connections with nature out there. Exemplified by the founding of, get this, ReWilding Lab. And that has to do with making us wilder again, or make us connection with the wild out there. But we'll talk more about rewilding, what it means. It's an innovative process. It's an initiative promoting nature's therapeutic and healing benefits. I mean, nature wants to help us, and boy, do we need it. Dana's early investigations into digital behavior illuminated the positive potential of online platforms, highlighting digital expressions of altruism, kindness, and heroism. We can all be heroes. Honored by the American Psychological Association and the World's Future Studies Federations, her insights are shared in numerous books, journals, and prominent media outlets. We're going to talk about her book for middle grade children who are growing up faster than you ever did, called Future Hack. It celebrates environmental activism and youth resilience in a rapidly changing world. Oh, Dana, welcome to Connecting with Coincidence.
Thank you, Bernard. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you. I'm glad we had our conversation beforehand too. And I will ask you, please, Dana, tell us a coincidence story.
Well, I'm going to tell you a coincidence story around rewilding. It was just an area that I have become really immersed in the past 3 years. And I've been thinking and had started writing an outline, a draft for a book on rewilding. And just like out of the blue, a publisher reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in writing a book on rewilding. And I had not reached out at all. And so here I had begun writing a book, and a publishing house reached out to me to ask would I be interested in writing one. And so I thought, wow, this is a really wonderful universal synchronicity or coincidence that has come together. And that's my, my most recent coincidence story.
Well, that's it's an important one for you, because as an author, it's nice to have a publisher, and
Yes.
it gets harder and harder with the competition out there and people reading less and less. So you did something here that I think is so wonderfully exemplary of something that's going on in my life and with other people. There's an imagining, and you call it intention, having an intention and having that intention manifest itself.
Yes.
And that was what The Secret was talking about in 2009, the book that came out that had to do with imagining and having things happen.
Yes.
Well, there's a certain set of principles that are involved with that, and somehow you imagined, energized it, and it happened. And when you think about it, besides being gratified, how do you think that happened?
Well, I think that we're all interconnected, and there's a planetary consciousness, and that there's a need. I feel like that there must be a need in the global psyche or global consciousness for this kind of material now. And so there was like a connection that happened to help manifest it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Another thing that you are picking up globally is the need for children, teenagers, to learn more about how to think about the future that they are facing. And would you tell us something about your book, Future Hack, and what it's about?
Yes, for many years, I've been really interested in helping youth take action to protect the environment. My first foray in that was called the Cyber Hero League, and it was all about empowering youth with the recognition that they could use digital technologies to, do things like sign petitions. And then that sort of has grown into this book, Future Hack, in which a group of youth around 12 years old are contacted by someone from the future asking for their help and their support to tackle certain critical missions that are important to protecting the future. Like, for example, protecting large predators like tigers, lions, and their habitat. And anyway, so the book is geared towards promoting youth activism and also just celebrating the fact that there are so many youth who are taking action now. And simultaneously, the book has this thread of anachronists. So what I was concerned about is a lot of young people now actually feel kind of alone in tackling these challenges. They feel like maybe the current generation of politicians and adults don't recognize and believe the importance of taking these kind of actions. But in fact, throughout history, there's been a lot of strong environmental leaders and activists like Rachel Carson, for example, who have made really strong strides and impacts. And so the book kind of ties together in this interesting sci-fi future hack way, activists from the past with activists from the current time and then the future.
And the activatingness, what are they trying to have happen?
Well, they're trying to, change the rate of destruction of the planet ultimately, right? Protect the rainforest, stop climate change, emissions and things like that. That's what their ultimate goal in the story is. So they're going to get, an airship. They're going to be able to travel all over the world and tackle these specific missions.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about, is just how are they going to do it? And this idea of coming from the future is not so crazy anymore.
Right.
This time is becoming a little bit more flexible. Many of us are recognizing. So when you describe the airship, I just a little bit more about how they go around doing stuff to help, like the Amazon and the rainforests around, like the rainforests of the state of Washington, for example.
In this first book, their whole mission and goal is to escape from this boarding school where they are, called Thistleton Academy, and it was supposed to be a green school. And it has been taken over by a corporation who wants to keep education in the status quo. And so everything about what they thought the school was is no longer what it was. And they find out that, in fact, that the school has been taken over by this corporation and they need to escape the school. So mainly in the first book, they are escaping from the school and they are getting the tools that they will need, including the airship, and they have a futuristic wearable that they can use to stay in touch with the person from the future. And so the first book sort of ends with the escape from the school and setting out on the first mission. So it's a series, and the second book will be about the Amazon. And so I'm in the process of writing that one right now. So I can't tell you how they're going to do it because I'm still working that out. But I can tell you it will have something to do with a shaman helping them.
Oh, that's the second book, but then there is the book that the publisher contacted you about. And is that a different book?
Oh, yes, that's a nonfiction book on rewilding. So Future Hack is a fiction book for middle grade readers. The one that I was contacted about is a nonfiction book on rewilding. Yeah.
What does rewilding mean?
Okay, rewilding comes from the field of conservation originally. And so rewilding began as a movement to reclaim areas and take them back to how they once were. So if a grove of trees was somewhere that's been denatured, then they would put the grove, the right type of vegetation back in that area. Or if it was a prairie, they would reclaim prairie land. And so that's the origin of the term rewilding. But the way I apply it, and what I became as a psychologist and futurist interested in, was how that same idea applies to the psyche. So the same way that the certain landscapes have been lost, right? If we apply that concept to the interior of our psyche, what have we lost? What have humans lost in the same sort of process by losing the wild, losing our connection with the wild things, the wild things?
There's a book
So
by that title.
Yeah, so that's what rewilding is to me. It's reclaiming our connection with the wild things.
Where the wild things are.
Yes, instead of being afraid of them, embracing them.
Instead of being afraid of them, embracing them, and it's the wild things inside of us. And
Inside and out, yeah.
and outside of, and there's another phrase a Jungian Roderick Mayne uses called re-enchanting the world.
Yes.
And that's in the direction that you're talking about, is somehow being able to see the magic and the mystery and the fun and the wonder and the awe and the all the stuff that's happening out there, so we can be curious to see what else is going on and be able to be amazed by how wonderful this planet can be.
That's right.
And you're trying to, I'm so glad of what you're doing. So especially getting to the kids. And you have a Rewilding Institute.
Yes, I recently founded it actually late last year. So it's a new enterprise for me called ReWilding Lab. And it is all about exploring these connections from a mythic standpoint and a scientific standpoint, because obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious to a lot of people because so much of it has been taken away from us, but historically, I guess one could say, we were steeped in the myths that connected us with the natural world, and that was all around in every culture. You know, in this country, we know most about the Native American connection to nature, and however that connection is celebrated around the world, and usually through myth. So I'm interested in bringing that together with the new scientific research that's been being done, a lot of it in the last 20 years, on the impact of the environment on humans. For example, you know, what bird songs can do to improve your health, or what forest bathing can do to improve your health. And so to marrying those together in a way that people can, to make it approachable.
Yeah, there's a lot. As I mentioned before, I have connections with these three trees, And we have fun and we dance, and they like me to sing to them, and they tell me things, and I usually feel pretty good I always feel good after having interacted with them, and it's pretty amazing sometimes the transition. They got stuff to tell us.
Yes.
And there's to find out how to communicate with nature, to not to recognize things out there, but also hear what nature is trying to tell us. What do you hear from nature, and from whom?
I kind of have a large pantheon of relationships with nature, and some of them go back to, I believe, my grandfather. When I was a child, my grandparents had a ranch in Arkansas, Clover Valley Ranch, and I remember some of my earliest memories standing out there, also under a tree. So trees, really I've always related with trees, but also bears. And Arkansas does have bears, and it seems like to me that's a motif that shows up throughout my dreams as well. The bear. I also have a lion that shows up a lot, but the lion is more of a mythic being. And then birds. I have a kind of a vast feather collection. So sometimes when people see my feather collection, they are like, "What are you going to do with those things?" And I've been contemplating on what I'm going to do with those feathers. But for right now, I'm just collecting them. And it seems like anytime I go out to walk, I always find one or more. They just sort of appear there. And so birds really speak to me.
And they speak through feathers, but how else do they speak to you?
Through dreams, I believe. I have, and through shamanic journeying. I have when I do shamanic journeying practices, I have a bird that often shows up and speaks to me. And yeah.
Part of my experience with birds out in the forest is every once in a while I can hear one making some song, and then I kind of imitate the song.
Oh.
And then so there's a back and forth with my imitating the bird, and then I change it a little bit, and the bird kind of goes with what I'm changing. And then the last time this happened, the bird made a complex rhythm that I couldn't follow. And that was the end. That was the end of it. It's just like, okay, the bird outdid what I was able to do, because it was that's a dialogue of just playing around, but also communicating out there in the wild with the wild things.
Yes, absolutely. Beautiful interaction and connection.
And connect. I think there's a lot of jokesters out there in the forest. I just think there's ones that just like to get me to laugh, or get people to laugh, because they're showing off in some form or another, from what I can tell. And part of it's to bring attention to them, but part of it's to get a laugh out of anybody walking in there, like any comedian.
Yes, no, that's very true. And it brings to my mind the work of Martin Shaw. He's a storyteller and mythologist. And I had the privilege to study with him. And one of the things he often talks about is that the wild seeks our admiration. It wants to be admired by us. And it wants to admire us. If we will just take the time to, actually be with nature. And, so many times people get outside, but they get out there with the idea of, and there's nothing wrong with this. I don't mean to say there is, but if, you're going out to exercise and your primary thing is you're running and you have your earbuds in and you're listening to some kind of a audio book or podcast or whatever. Again, nothing wrong with that, but that's not the same type of interaction that you're going to have if you're specifically going out in nature to be with nature and to just experience the awe that you can that can arise when you are present, fully present with nature in a mindful way.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think that's so true. And I'll just to back that up a little bit. There was one time a couple of years ago, well, not the three trees, but it seemed like the whole forest said, "Don't come back here anymore."
Yeah.
At least for 6 weeks. And the reason was I was doing too much thinking there. And then the three trees that I mentioned, sometime around then, told me, and it was a telepathic kind of experience. It came like that from outside of me. It wasn't my thinking. It said, "Get that redhead here."
Oh.
And I went, without going through all the details of it, it turned out that they wanted Laura Lee to come up there because she's an artist and she could appreciate their beauty. And they were mad at me because I was just thinking too much in there.
Oh, that's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've learned to appreciate more and more with that knock on the head, pretty much, that how beautiful how funny some of those trees are with some of the way they do their little dance and by themselves, and they're just talking with them and getting to know them and feeling them.
Yes.
And the ants, there was a time I was lying down and there was these ants climbing all over me the only time it happened, and it felt like it was the forest fingers trying to figure out what this thing was in the forest. It's a conscious being.
Yes.
And it's alive with consciousness that's curious, and you are trying to help people recognize what's out there.
Absolutely. Well, that's right. It is, and it's interesting that your relationship with the trees brings to mind, a lot of, well, many of the ancient rituals and rites were held in forest, in clearings, and the trees were the protecting and grounding space, and they have witnessed, human ritual for millennium. And the thing about the trees is, more and more research again has found that the trees are interconnected and they're speaking to each other, through root systems, through the leaves. They are not. Yeah, they're alive. We know that. But science is now supporting that kind of a idea, and recognizing that the earth, is the oldest thing that we have to connect with. Oftentimes people don't realize, they just don't stop to think about the fact that the trees are providing us with the oxygen that's keeping us alive. I mean, there is such an intimate relationship between us and the trees. I've often thought about that it's so overlooked. As school children, we learn about the web of life, and we learn that the trees are creating, helping us stay alive, but it sort of kind of comes in and out because so much of education wants to de-spiritualize nature and break it down into materialistic terms, and we need both. We need education in both.
We do. We do. I call them our lumbering giants, as a way of, they gave us shelter for a long time, just climbing up in them.
Yeah, or sitting under one.
or sitting under one, or then making houses out of them, and then they became products. And
Yeah.
I often feel sad when I see a truck with a lot of a lot of trunks of cut trees on.
I know it is a sad sight.
That's they're cutting down living beings. And the other people communicate with trees in different ways. I have this singing thing just because I like to sing and they like me to sing, and not too many people like me to sing. I got to be careful, and they like particular songs for me to sing, and I like to ask them what do they want, to hear, and we get into little dance things. They can be playful. I even saw, as I was singing once, two trees across a little path, what seemed like they were dancing with each other, but it was hard to, and once I looked directly, I couldn't see it, but there was an energy between the trees. So they're interacting with each other as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
And they're an interesting bunch of people out there, and you're trying to help people get there. And I think it's marvelous thing that you're doing and trying to get us denatured. We've been denatured and now we're getting renatured. And
Yes.
that's what you're trying to help people do, and especially help the kids do.
Yes. And, during the pandemic, a lot of people did have occasion to go outside and be with nature. And I do think that there is there's a movement in that direction. And so it's really just trying to, hold on to that movement instead of, it's like the return to the office. That's a big conversation now. And again, I'm not saying what any business should or shouldn't do as far as return to the office. But one thing I definitely do think they should be doing is providing green spaces for their employees to have breaks, and not just a tiny little patio, but real green space where there is flora and fauna. There are birds and moss and lichens, or whatever type of nature suits the area.
The people listening and watching us are many interested in synchronicity. What would you be telling them? What suggestions would you be giving them about helping themselves rewild?
Well, I will say that since there are listeners are interested in synchronicities, that spending time in nature does increase the chances of experiencing these synchronicities. And my rationale behind that, if anybody needs a rationale, is again, when we take time out to stop from the busyness of our daily lives and just tune in to nature, we get still and quiet. We sort of open up maybe energies that we normally aren't paying attention to, because there's so much noise in our lives, and noise doesn't necessarily just mean actual sounds, but the noisiness inside of our brain, and that when we're in nature, that we're returning to where we have evolved, and that by doing so we are opening these connections. So I would say that anyone interested in enhancing their experience of synchronicities go into nature.
Could you maybe describe that with a little more detail? I think that's a very important idea.
In the sense of like
How to do it.
out,
How to do it.
yes, okay. Well, just set aside the time, find a place in nature that you feel comfortable, that you feel safe, that you won't be disturbed, and take a seat, ground yourself. If possible, sit on the earth itself. One can sit under a tree and lean against a tree if one feels the need for support, or a lake, a river, some body of water is also traditionally been, a source for inspiration and relaxation. So anywhere such as that you can get quiet, feel safe and grounded, and then just get quiet, and just tune in to what's going on around you, to the sounds, the sights, without trying to think about it, just as a meditation on being fully present. So it's a mindfulness meditation on full awareness and presence. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to be trying to do something. You don't need to be trying to think about, synchronicities. Just be aware of the natural world.
And what kinds of synchronicities might someone expect in that situation, if they get to that place?
Well, that I think is very individual, but I will say that they might experience some type of message from the natural world itself. So, yeah, they might have some question that they had that they weren't bringing it up while they were sitting there, but that an answer seems to float in from the bird, from the tree, from the brook, from, the wind, from the heat of the sun or the shade, that things can come to us in unexpected ways if we'll just get quiet enough to be present.
That's the name of the poem that I wrote about, that read it here begins with the forest speaks to me sometimes through the trees. And that's what you're suggesting, is that you can be open and hear. And sometimes you can hear not just answers to your particular questions, but you can hear something about what's going on with the trees or the forest or something or whatever else is there. So they can tell you about themselves. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And sometimes animals begin to show up when you're in a meditative state and you're accepting, and they're curious about us, and they kind of take a look at us. And if we're calm in that state that you're mentioning, they can hang around, and sometimes you can make a connection with them. And I did that with some deer just sitting out in front of my house, and a couple of deers, and I was looking into their eyes, and one in particular, and I could understand what a herd mentality felt like. They were all one mind in many respects, okay, so I got a sense of their own experience of themselves.
Interesting. And another point about that is that if, while one is sitting in nature, and let's just say you don't have an experience like we're talking about, to just accept that and to be okay with it, and to not be disappointed at all, because these experiences build upon themselves. We show a commitment if we keep showing up, no matter what it is in life, right? When you are doing something, you have to keep showing up. So when you haven't been present for nature, you can't necessarily just say, okay, I'm going to go do this once and see what I get from it. No, it's about building a relationship with the natural world again, and going back again, like you do with your trees, that is a special conversation that you have built with those trees. And also, I think listeners might want to know that these things can also come into your dreams. So you might not have an experience while you're out there, but then at night you might have a dream that's very poignant, and animals and trees and other natural things might speak to you through your dreams, because you're more open to that. Because sometimes we've built up so many layers of saying, no, I can't communicate with the tree, or birds can't speak to me. That's how we're taught. We're educated to believe that. However, deep inside of our psyche, we know differently than that. And so when we're asleep, then the doors open. that conversation.
And I believe I heard about a butterfly that appeared in a dream that you had. I wonder if you
Yeah.
would tell us about that one.
Yes, I will. And this one of my very treasured dreams, memories, actually. It's really stayed with me. When I was a grad student at Saybrook, I had the privilege to, well, study with Stanley Krippner.
And who is Stanley Krippner?
Okay, Stanley is an esteemed professor of, well, let's say the paranormal.
Let's say that, yes.
Yeah, shamanism is part of Stanley's area of expertise, but in general, dream studies is sort of what put Stanley on the map. So that sort of interestingly ties into this dream that I had. So I was on this waiting list. Everyone who are I would say 90% of the people who wanted to attend Saybrook wanted to study with Stanley. Or a couple of other esteemed faculty. But anyway, I definitely wanted to study with Stanley, and I put myself on the waiting list for a course with him. And just every semester kept passing by, and I was never getting the course with Stanley. And so it was sort of bothering me, in the back of my mind, thinking, well, I guess next semester. And anyway, I went to sleep and I had this dream that I was in Stanley's backyard, wandering around in his backyard, and a white butterfly came up and landed on my finger, and it bit my finger. And I was so taken aback. I went, walked through the yard over to where Stanley was, let's say at a patio area. And I said, Stanley, this butterfly bit my finger. And he just shrugged and he said, it happens sometimes. And I thought, no, that's so strange. It doesn't really happen that butterflies bite you, or at least none that I had known. So of course that stuck in my mind when I woke up. And because the dream was so unusual, and I wanted to see what did Stanley, as a dream, guru and shamanic guru, what would Stanley say about this dream? So I sent him an email, and I was quite nervous at the time because, I was a young grad student. He was this important, still eminent psychologist. And I said, I had this dream. I explained it to him. What does it mean? And then I also made a notation in the email that I had been waiting to take a course with him and, hadn't been selected yet. So anyway, he wrote back and he basically just said that the white butterfly was sometimes one of his totems. So like in the shamanic world, one of his totems, and that he had double checked his list and that I wasn't on it for the course, that for some reason I had never been on the waiting list, and that he had added me to the list, and that in his opinion, we could take the dream to basically mean that, it connected us. And so now I was on the waiting list, and it was kind of a synchronicity, because if I had not had the dream, I would have never been approached to have that course that I so wanted to have with him. And we went on to build a relationship. And in fact, he was one of the co-chairs on my dissertation. So I ended up having a nice long-term relationship with Stan.
Well, what is much clearer to me now is that the butterfly was white, and you may have written that, but I didn't picture that white butterflies are not that common.
Right.
And they don't bite. They don't bite. And it's a totem of his. That is the crucial to me synchronicity. I mean, yeah, you were not on the waiting list, and the bite was tell you to make you call him. But the deeper connection, if I were Stanley, is to here's a graduate student who's incorporating in a dream without knowing it a major totem in my life. So there's something for us to explore together, and that's a beautiful synchronicity.
I felt that way, and I think Stanley must have as well, since he made sure that I got added to the list, and then we continued to work together.
Oh, he has to have.
Yeah, well, I agree.
He has to have. Uh, it's some graduate student, white butterfly. What? That's me. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? It's like, it's not just she's not there. There's that. So there's some connection between you and Stanley that butterfly illustrated. And again, this also emphasizes how sometimes not getting what you want when you want it turns out to be a good idea, because if you'd gotten into the course, you would have been another graduate student. But in this way, you dreamed Stanley's totem, which demonstrated that what synchronicity so often does, a connection between you and him that might not have been apparent earlier on. There could have been something else that happened that made that connection evident. But you and Stanley were connected through a white butterfly. And
Yes, it was a beautiful, one of my most treasured dreams.
as it should be, because you found a connection with a person that you really wanted to have a connection with.
Yes.
And you found the sign, the symbol of that connection in your dream. What a wonderful example of what synchronicity can do for people, is bring them together in their hearts, not just their minds. But I can tell how heartfelt that was for you to
Yes.
have that totem connection with Stanley, just to be part of it. But I can be on the other side of that, and I know that for him there was a heart connection to you because you dreamed a white butterfly.
I'm sure that you had a lot of students at the University of Virginia who felt the same way about working with you.
Nope. Nope. I've gotten into this stuff after being an academic and the University of Virginia, and I don't have that relationship.
Okay.
I would like to be able to have a way of teaching this in a formal setting, because that book, Meaningful Coincidences, is half a textbook. I mean, it's partially a textbook as well as something, a guidebook. And so I'm dreaming of a course. But
Oh, well,
it's finding a place to be able to do that is still off in the distance. But thank you for thinking that possibility.
oh, yes. And I would say Saybrook. Saybrook would be a wonderful institute for your course.
I should think of stuff like that.
Yeah, Saybrook or Institute of
California.
yeah, CIIS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, we've come to the end of our time pretty much. But we still have a little bit of time if you want. And I want to leave it open to you because I love what you're doing. I really admire how clearly you express yourself, and you're welcome. And how you know what you're talking about and comes out. And there's a passion in you that is much stronger than has come across directly on this interview. But you're really into this. It's another way of saying it, and you're really into, with a deep commitment, a deep desire, a need in you. I recognize, because that's what I'm doing with synchronicity. You have a deep desire, need. It's on. I call it my job. You got a job. Rewild people. I mean, that's like. I mean, it's supposed to be mission, purpose, and all those words. To me,
Yes.
it's like a job, and I love it. And to me, I'm seeing you in kind of parallel, having a job, and you're getting to the kids, which I so admire and appreciate.
Thank you. It's an exciting time. I feel like it is a passion for me. I'm bringing together various threads of interest that I have, and some that go way back, that again at the time I didn't do as much with as I might have wanted to, and now I've sort of reached a place in my life where yes, I want to bring these threads together in a meaningful way and be doing work that's fulfilling for myself, because I do feel that then that is fulfilling for the people and organizations that I work with. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge because, yes, the term rewilding is not well known. It is well known in the field of conservation, but as far as psychology or psychotherapy, it's not so much a term that anyone is using. So it's kind of like
yeah, it's a
ground.
it's a challenge. And I'm going to guess, Dana, I'm just going to guess that you like challenges. Just gonna guess. I don't know where.
Seems to be.
I don't know where I get that, but it's part of the fun of it. It's like, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? And then you kind of figure out what you're going to do now. I mean, that's it's an adventure really, and into the unknown, and it comes to you, and then you figure out how you're going to do it. Before we end, there's one thing I'd like to be able to have for those people who are still listening to us now. You mentioned a lot of threads of your life and of your experiences coming together now. And sometimes when you were doing whatever you were doing, you don't know how that has anything to do with anything except you like doing it or you're involved with it. And having a broad range of experiences has set you up to be able to do what you're doing, because you can bridge a lot of different disciplines, experiences, and it's a beautiful experience for you to be able to see that all this stuff that seemed not unconnected or disconnected is really feeding in to helping you with your passion to be expressed.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And I do think that in a way that does, yes, speak directly to synchronicities that we don't recognize maybe all along when we're engaged in certain things, how these threads are going to come back and tie themselves together, but then they do.
And then they do.
Yeah.
And then it's really whatever the positive feeling is. I'll call it fun. I think it's fun, but that's the one I go for. I like having fun. I like having a good time. So I think it's a good time. So that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. We've gotten to the end of our discussion, and if I just ask you if there's anything more you would like to say to our audience before we stop.
Go out in nature and get quiet and build a relationship and see how it can enrich your life.
That's the message. Thank you very much, Dana, for being with me today. It's really been fun talking with you.
Thank you, Bernard.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.